These doctors and nurses are fighting an epidemic. They are up against a disease usually associated only with poor, underdeveloped countries on the other side of the world. Yet in the United States, the disease affects millions. Here in Memphis, thousands are afflicted. The disease is called malnutrition, a shortage of the foods that make the body grow, a final step before starvation. For the past 3 years, an unusual team of medical researchers here at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital has been treating malnutrition among the children of Memphis. What these doctors have found is the subject of this program. But before we begin, 2 points should be made. First, during the next half hour, we will see pictures of children, many of whom are ill. This quite naturally may provoke an emotional response. But we are going to make every effort to approach what can be a highly emotional subject with reason. Secondly, this program may appear initially only a presentation of yet another insurmountable social welfare problem. But as we shall see, it is not insurmountable. This program is about a problem we have begun to solve.
Open your mouth real wide. Ah. 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 Very good.
St. Jude Hospital, just north of downtown Memphis, is the children's research hospital founded by entertainer Danny Thomas. It is known throughout the world as a pioneer in the treatment of leukemia, a rare form of cancer which afflicts children. Because cancer patients usually have nutritional problems, many of St. Jude's staff, such as Dr. Paul Zay, are specialists in the field of nutrition. 3 years ago, Dr. Zay began treating a number of children who were not victims of leukemia. In fact, they appeared to be normal children, except that they did not seem to be getting enough to eat.
Well, I had seen malnutrition as a child in Holland, and I had seen it on a professional basis in South America. And I have seen the severely malnourished, swollen, stunted children, as you well know them from the CARE picture. And when you go through the city here, these are not the kind of children that you find. But once we start looking into it, we saw these children coming into the clinics. We found that the child who we thought was 8 years old turned out to be 10 years old. When we start comparing them to normal charge, we found how stunted in growth they were. When we looked at the biochemistry, we found how low many of the values were. Of course, these are not written all out all over them, but on the inside we found how undernourished they were. And secondly, if you drive through poor Memphis, what I didn't recognize that behind the houses I was driving by, there was another alley, and behind that alley there were conditions I had never heard of. Memphis is just as bad and not worse than many of the other big cities with big urban areas.
The children treated at St. Jude were referred to the hospital by a long-established community self-help organization called Memphis Area Project South. All of the children lived in the MAP South area, composed of 9 census tracts, which run south from Beale Street. The MAP South area is in that part of Memphis, politely referred to as the inner city. It is old, poor, and crowded. Most of its inhabitants are black, and the median family income is $2,600 a year. Using MAP South's 9 census tracts as the test area, preschool age children were selected at random and given routine examinations and blood tests. They were also weighed, measured, and sometimes disturbed from their routines.
The idea is that we learn about malnutrition to its effects. One cannot sit with the children each day and see how much they eat, but one can measure such things as height and weight and hemoglobin levels and vitamin A levels, and from our knowledge of effects, one can then reason that there is a lack of nutritious food in sufficient quantity in their diets. And we discovered a shocking degree of malnutrition, an epidemic of this in our own city of Memphis among low-income families.
Did you find, did you get on your camera how thin she is? You know, you see how her shoulders come up? You see how thin she is? And see how thin her arms are? And, show your legs. See the thin legs you got? There's no fat under there. Give me a skin color. I know what. Did you see what she?
Yeah.
See, 3 millimeters. That is, you know, even I am more than that. I'm 4 on my wrist. And see how loose those shoulders are. See how loose it is.
Dr. Zay's survey of a random sample of children found that, first of all, in layman's terms, the children of the Map South area of Memphis are small for their ages. In fact, when their measurements were plotted on a growth chart on which an average child's height and weight is 50th percentile, half of the children were below the 25th percentile. 16% of the children were below the 3rd percentile for height and weight, meaning 16% of the children were severely stunted in growth, stunted to a degree usually found only in undeveloped nations with a very limited food supply. Secondly, blood tests revealed 90% of the children under 3 years of age were anemic, and among those 3 to 5 years old, 75% were anemic, causing them to be weak, drowsy, slow to respond. Thirdly, in addition to finding most of the children retarded in growth and anemic, St. Jude's survey revealed that 1/4 of the children suffered from infections of the skin or respiratory tract, a common effect of malnutrition, which not only increases susceptibility to disease, but impairs the body's ability to heal itself of minor injuries and infections. But the most serious handicap Dr. Zay found in the children of Map South has to do with the effect of malnutrition on the brain. The doctors have known for some time that the soft skull of an infant grows only as much as is necessary to accommodate the brain. The head gets larger only as the brain cells multiply and enlarge. Thus, in small children, a measurement of the size of the head indicates the size of the brain. When the children surveyed by St. Jude were measured and figures plotted on a normal growth chart, 15% of the children had head circumferences below the 2nd percentile, meaning 15% of the children had brains severely stunted in growth. This degree of stunting below the 2nd percentile indicates strongly these children will have some type of mental disability. And perhaps more important, the brain will not catch up if the child is well fed later in life. St. Jude's research confirms what has been shown in earlier studies. The brain does almost all of its growing very early.
The brain grows most, in a human for instance, grows most in the first 6 months after birth and the last 6 months before birth. So before and after month, before and after birth, for 6 months on each side, there is a rapid growth of the brain. And this growth, if you interfere with this nutritionally, cannot be reversed. And this has been definitely shown in animal studies. Here we have what for all practical purposes looks like a newborn baby. However, this baby is 2 months old. It weighs 5 pounds and 9 ounces, and it was born with a weight of 5 pounds and 11 ounces. So in the last 2 months, it in fact has lost 2 ounces of its birth weight. The baby was born in a hospital locally, and the mother was sent home 3 hours after the baby was born. There's no subcutaneous fat whatsoever. Look, for instance, the buttocks, they are severely malnourished. There's no fat whatsoever there. The head circumference is rather small. The soft spot is rather small. It has been shown that babies who were severely malnourished, like this child was, that many had them been shown to be mentally retarded. This was not in our country, but was in South America, where conditions are much more severe. Of course, now we are 2 months. We still have 4 months left of brain growth. If we actively push it, we may reverse some of the damage that is done at this point. It is possible the child will continue to be smaller than normally, and maybe is less intelligent than normally, but we cannot say for sure.
And so Dr. Zay found himself with hundreds of young patients who not only were apathetic and slow to learn, they were also small, anemic, and suffering from an assortment of minor colds and skin infections. For the disease which held him back, he prescribed no exotic medicines or vaccines, only food. In this case, surplus food from the United States Department of Agriculture. Once a month, cereal, orange juice, evaporated milk, and other items are distributed by MapSouth workers to about 1,000 families in South Memphis. The food is provided under the federal government's food supplement program. Government regulations say the USDA surplus food must go only to families with incomes of less than $3,000 a year, and only enough food may be allotted to feed those members of the family who are under 6 years of age. Despite these limitations, the program is a start, and it does move some 200 tons of food into South Memphis each month. St. Jude Hospital adds to the prescription baby food and an iron-enriched infant formula called Similac. Once the children were getting better food and more of it, the next step was to follow up with routine medical care. MapSouth's 9 census tracts were divided into 4 areas, and a nurse practitioner was assigned to each one. The nurses have become family doctors, and they have renewed a practice seldom seen these days, house calls.
She really looks better, Miss Derrick. See, now she is picking up some weight. What is she eating?
She's off the table now.
Oh, something like what? Like what did she have for breakfast?
She an egg and a half, and she ate some cereal, and a glass of milk.
She really looks much better.
Janet, we're going to see what a big girl you are. That's it. That's beautiful. Now stand nice and tall. Don't hold on to it. Okay. 23 pounds. My. Okay, I'd like to show you where that is on the growth grid. That's good.
One of the major problems in our the poverty society is that there is no access to medical care. And by building up a relation between the nurse practitioner and her and the patient, we have now an access between the two. If there is a child is sick, she can call the nurse practitioner and then has access to whatever needs to be done. And they don't have to take a bus to the city hospital, wait a long time, get a doctor they don't know, get referred to another doctor they do not know, and on day it is inconvenient and the like.
There are many advantages in going into the patient and seeing them in their own environment, getting that rapport that you get only by being in a natural environment. The patients are happy to have us come. I think it's perhaps my first experience in really seeing a medical person go to the patient. And I find going into the home, you get an entirely different view and picture of the child. Mrs. Granberry is a mother of 7 children. Her husband has just finished his term in service, and he's employed for a minimum of $85 a week. But he's working for a nursery, which of course, if the weather is inclement, he doesn't get an income. And he is expected to pay for $50 a month for rent, and the average of $25 to $35 for utilities. And he's just above the food stamp eligibility. So there's just nothing, well, a minimum of about $20 left for food for the month for 7 children. Not being eligible for food stamps, there's just no way of stretching the food dollar. So the Granberries really don't have sufficient to provide for the family. I believe that we gain another concept of what we can really do for a child by seeing them in their own environment. We can understand better how unrelated some of the directions and orders that we give to the family on homegoing after the child is, say, rehabilitated to a degree, and they leave the hospital, and an awareness that they're going back to the environment from which they came is going to give us a different, well, we'll put the orders in a different framework, for example. If you, for example, the many skin conditions that we see, and you advise the mother to soak the foot 3 times a day, as it's common when a child has stepped in a nail. Well, it's important to know that there is probably, in many of these homes, no hot water. Some don't have plumbing at all. Some don't have a pan or utensils to soak the foot in. And so you think in terms of providing for that. If you really want that wound to heal, you'll see about providing a pan to soak the foot in.
We have a number of children who are under 5 years old who are severely stunted in growth. We have or the MAP South community does have a supplementary food program, and these children are on the food program, and they receive medical care at our place. And despite their and our effort, we cannot make these children catch up in the growth that they are lacking. And we have recognized that part of this is environmental. And through the help of St. Peter's, and one lady who volunteers her services, Mrs. Hajar, we are able to bring 5 children, and now I believe 7 children, in for supervised play and 3 meals a day, 5 days a week. At night they go home, and in the morning they come back.
It's actually to see what we can recoup from malnutrition. We know that the damage done is permanent. Quite a bit of it is permanent. But we thought, what could we do for a child if we had them in a controlled situation for a 10-hour period each day and expose them, and not only fed them well, and it's excellent food that they get here, but also expose them to a very healthy atmosphere with plenty of room to play, and other children to play with, nice clean little beds to sleep in for nap time, and to see whether that would help in promoting better health, and particularly in gaining weight, because these kids haven't gained weight in a long period of time. The children are from rather poor families, and it is a fact that in some cases they don't have a wide range of food or the variety that we can offer them here, and the plentiful supply of milk, and the very healthy atmosphere where they can really run around. Their homes are quite congested, and no opportunity for them to play as here. Some people have asked, why have the parents neglected them? And that isn't so at all. They have, in most cases, very loving parents and loving families. It's just a case of not having the proper food in the correct amount. Our program is restricted to children under 6 years old. So even when food is provided to a family who's desperately in need of food, naturally our youngster is competing with other family members for that food. And this is another problem. And particularly in a very young child, when he doesn't even know how to eat by himself, and is perhaps on the bottle too long and doesn't know about solid food, his chances of really getting in there and getting at the food are very slim. So we try to teach them to handle food by themselves, become self-sufficient.
And it is amazing to see how much these children open up, how ebullient they become, how joyful and cheerful they become. And it is really remarkable how they open up. And it is sometimes tragic to see how these children, once they go home again, how they withdraw into themselves again. And in the second place, they gain weight more than we expected them to, and they gain in height more than we expected. The only problem is, a program like this must be done for at least a year, if not more, for the children to catch up the severe lack of growth that they have. And unfortunately, we are only able to do it for 2 months. We do it for 2 months because the waiting line is too long. If we had more children or more places, we would put them in for 3 months or 6 months. But we're really making a compromise. It should be done for a whole year and more.
But the two major causes of poor pregnancy that stand out above all these others are poor nutrition and the youth of the mother. And so that's why we want to spend a lot of time on talking about how to obtain a good diet. And the purpose of the clinic is primarily to give good prenatal care to these ladies who before have not been able, because of money or transportation, to get the kind of care that they've needed. And most of the ladies that we see here in the clinic have not had access to this care, and usually they would go to John Gaston or to one of the city hospitals when they were ready to deliver with no previous prenatal care. So we've been trying to have a concerted effort to pick out the ladies that are pregnant, to bring them into the clinic as soon as we find out that they are, and to start them with instructions on how to care for themselves with prenatal vitamins, and the nurse teaches them about the physical problems that they will encounter, and I teach them about their nutritional needs and how to plan their diet so that they will get an optimal diet. And the doctor sees them each time in the clinic, the same doctor, to check any problems that they have. And they are delivered at St. Joseph Hospital, and then their babies are followed in our nutrition program.
They come from an area where 3 years ago there was an enormous high infant mortality. And the effect of this has been that instead of this census tract of being 8 infant deaths that year, we had, that is 3 years ago, we have now 1 death. We also find that the children that are born are not quite as small as other children are, but we do find a large number of adult term, that is 9 months infants, which are severely undergrown. And we have followed those children for 1 year now, and it is amazing how well they do.
Dr. Zay and his co-workers have learned a great deal during the last 3 years about the effects of malnutrition. They have, of course, shown again what was already known. When a child is deprived of food, he may be physically and mentally crippled for life. But more important, they have proven that a surprisingly small and inexpensive amount of food prevents malnutrition. The Nutrition Clinic's Food by Prescription program is a model of practical research, but it is only a beginning. St. Jude Hospital is a research institution. It can only study a disease and find a cure. Then it is up to others to carry out the treatment. There are indications that this is happening. The organization known as the Fund for Needy School Children has used St. Jude's findings to get government funds for a highly successful free lunch program in Memphis City schools. The Memphis and Shelby County Health Department, at first slow to respond to St. Jude's research, now has taken over and expanded the hospital's infant feeding program. Through the health department, babies born in low-income families at City of Memphis hospitals are given the infant formula Similac for 1 year. The staff of St. Jude's Nutrition Clinic is encouraged by these and other examples of a growing concern for the children of Memphis. Yet, much remains to be done.
We need more food. And many of the low-income families still do not have adequate food, in spite of food supplement programs, infant formula program, and food stamps. A large proportion of low-income families, for one reason or another, are not able to get food stamps. The food stamps themselves do not provide an adequate amount of food at the prices we have today. The food supplement is inadequate. So what is needed for improved nutrition among low-income families in Memphis is more food. Now, you can put more food into their hands by providing a higher income or by improving our food stamp program or a food supplement program, making these more liberal than they are. I'm in favor of the food supplement program. I think it should be increased considerably. More families should be included in it, and more food should be made available to each family enrolled in the food supplement program.
If you could provide a mother who is pregnant with a proper diet and her child in the first years of life with a good diet, you may actually prevent a number of problems, such as children who are inferior in the sense that they don't perform well, they don't get their high school education, so you get in problems of unemployment, public works, correction institute. As you well know, poverty is typically related to the high number of mental retarded, cerebral palsy, and other neurological disorders. And each of those disorders takes a large amount of money to correct or to maintain. Mental institutions, corrections, judicial systems, police force, and the like. They are very expensive compared to 3 meals a day and a can of milk a day.
We have an epidemic of malnutrition in progress in Memphis and throughout the United States that is largely unrecognized and uncared for. If this was smallpox or diphtheria, why we would all be up in arms and we would be now taking all measures to eliminate this epidemic. Yet we are dealing with an epidemic of malnutrition, which is every bit as bad as an epidemic of smallpox or diphtheria in terms of mortality, disease, and disability. And we're doing very little to correct this epidemic, to stop this epidemic in relationship to its severity, extent, and future damage to the American people.
Later on, you're going to play and have a nice time with the toys. Would you like to do that? Anthony, please go on. Look at him. Typical Eddie.